Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Observable Flutter. Thanks for your patience as we started 8 minutes late today. Sometimes computers are going to computer and they don't want to play nice. But at great last, we are here. My name is Craig Labenz, and I'm your host. And today I'm excited to be joined by an esteemed Flutter and Dart GDE who I believe is a two-time guest now, but I'll let him answer that more decisively in just a moment. So everybody do recall this is the Flutter community and we all know what that means. All right. So joining me today is, I keep forgetting. I gotta add the little light. There's an extra bit of luminance on the other slides that I need to add to the conduct slide. It's like a dark corner of Observable Flutter now. At any rate, I'm joined today by Çağatay Ulusoy, who has been working on an extremely interesting language learning app that is, for some reason, targeted to only one language. And I feel like it could easily be targeted, well, easily is probably not correct, but it could be targeted at all kinds of languages. And then I, too, would download it and learn Spanish and Korean. At any rate, I, again, will let Çağatay explain himself. But Çağatay, welcome to Observable Flutter.
Hello. This is my second time, yes, and I'm very happy to be here.
Nice. Well, I'm excited to have you back. So, okay, tell everyone about the app that you've been working on.
Okay, so it's a language learning app, and it was definitely started only for myself because I live in Finland. It has been 15 years, and I still feel the shame and public shame also that I don't speak the language in a country that you live for 15 years, because this is Nordics. In Nordics, everyone speaks English very well, everyone. But still, to be part of the life, to be well integrated to the society, you need to speak English. You need to speak Finnish, the language of the country. But the thing is that, we are expats at the same time, and I came to this country 15 years ago only with a luggage. Now I have my family, my kid, my home, and everything. I have to work a lot. So I've been working a lot, progressing on my career, didn't have time. And actually, it is very, very difficult nowadays. People at my age go to courses and stay there for 3 hours to learn the language. And people are spending a lot of time with mobile phones. Thing is that in most of the apps that are like from States or like these big apps like Duolingo, they feel like the language learning is kind of hobby. But for people like us, it's like super important it's like a existential thing that you need to be you need to learn the language, and otherwise very difficult to integrate. And also, like, for example, now I have a newborn, soon it will start the school, and I need to be able to speak with the teacher. That's why it's not like really like a hobby. Also, like, to get the citizenship in many countries in like Europe, you need to pass this exam where you can prove that you can speak the language of the country, then you get the citizenship. So, and also for residence permit, also in some countries, to get the residence permit, you need to prove some language proficiency. So for this kind of cases, it's no longer a hobby. And actually, my app, I don't see my app as a language learning app. My app is kind of an integration app, and language learning is a small part of it. That's why, but the problem I'm solving is helping people to integrate the country better, and language is a starting point. And this app started 1 year ago with paywall, but without paywall, the story goes back to 4 years ago. This is my fourth repository. My first repository was in 2020, where I was discovering Flutter. And then I changed job, I did Android, and then there was second attempt, third attempt, the fourth attempt is finally the one. Because what made this special is that this was the time that AI came into my app. It made it super, super special. And I realized that there are some features that people would pay for it. And then the question is like, why is it only Finnish? Because I had two options. I'm not doing this to make a lot of money. I'm doing this to first experiment with Flutter and find the use cases of AI. it's pretty straightforward to add another language, but then you need to create content. To creating content takes a lot of time, and like I just want to focus on the technology side, taking one language and then be the market leader. Currently, I'm the market leader. It's the top app. And I remember when I first presented this to you, you said, watch out Duolingo. I think it was around 1 year ago when I first demoed this to you. And in fact, like I'm really coming. Like nowadays, I think today, I last time checked it, I was on the 17th in the Apple listing in the education category. Number one is Duolingo. But of course, Duolingo is teaching every language. I'm teaching only Finnish. So yeah, I'm climbing up. But yeah, this project still didn't have this like the concern of like making money. If I switch to that, probably I will. Or I'm a one-team person, one-person team, and that's also another factor. That why is this only a single language?
Wow. Okay, so there's so much there to respond to. First of all, 1 year later, I still have my watch out Duolingo perspective on this. Duolingo increasingly to me feels like a streak maintaining app with some, vocabulary quizzes kind of stapled on the side. So it's like a third or fourth afterthought in Duolingo these days is actually learning language. First, you got to maintain your streak. Then you got to open a chest. Then you got to nudge your friends. Then you got to, anyway. So also totally appreciate the, it's never as easy to add on a feature as like somebody who has not seen the code base thinks it should be. So yeah, going many to many languages, extraordinarily difficult, no doubt. I also, boy, does it resonate, the idea of a side project that gets to its fourth repository at some point, and you're trying all these different experiments. Like, oh man, that really that really resonates with me for sure. Different games that I've worked on over the years, or I was once working on a social check-in app for just video games. So like if you were going to play Rocket League or Mario Kart or something, and you wanted just all of your friends who also played those games to just be aware that you're playing right now. They get a push notification that had at least 3 repositories. So anyway, that's all extremely real experiences that you've shared there. So you mentioned wanting to focus heavily on the technical side of everything, and as a software engineer first, you're an extremely prolific, obviously Flutter GDE, extremely prolific engineer yourself. So just wanting to focus on the tech and experiment makes a ton of sense. Hopefully Çağatay returns shortly. I'm not sure where he's just gone off to, but I'm just going to keep monologuing here because that's what I do. And I may have to repeat these words so that he can answer this question, though, because I'm now talking to everybody except him, which is an interesting... Aha! He's back! We got him! So I was saying, before I started riffing, what was I saying? Oh yeah, experimenting, blah, 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 blah. So you've run through all these different experiments over the years, and the current topic of your experimentation is, of course, the same topic as was on the thumbnail for this stream, GenUI. So you've written some great blog posts about that I have enjoyed reading, and I'm going to pass the talking stick to you in just a second here. And while you talk, I'm going to pull the links to your blog post so I can share them with everyone. But can you kind of set the stage for folks a little bit about GenUI? I think some people here have maybe already heard of it. So yeah, what GenUI is and like what it's bringing to your Finish It app.
Yes. So I also shared Twitter thread about this, and when I started this, I said like, what is not GenUI? Let's start with that, because GenUI, when you talk about generative UI, it sounds like you are actually using LLM to generate the UI, write the Flutter UI code for you. This is not GenUI. And when I first heard the term, I thought this was GenUI. So let's start with that. GenUI, I think, like the concept is something, and the way to achieve is another thing. The concept is that LLM gives you text output, and you make it structured, and then you extract this information from the structured output, like a JSON or whatever it is, and then you map what LLM tells you to draw on the screen using your widgets. So this is the whole idea. You tell what you would like to do. You tell your use case to LLM, large language model, Gemini, let's say, and then you provide your widget catalog, and then you tell that, hey, use my widget catalog, tell me how I compose my screen, and it gives you like a widget tree that you, and then there is this surface widget that draws this widget tree inside your screen. So you provide LLM a kind of a canvas, and then LLM tells you what to draw in it. LLM says that these are the widgets for on top this component, your second component, and then there's column. Here it is. So this is the idea. So I have a blog post series on that. The first one is about how I use Gemini Nano Banana Pro to draw an image and use this image in language learning purposes. So I really believe in the power of visually learning. And my goal is that you look at the image and then you try to think about surroundings, and you build a vocabulary around these surroundings. In fact, this is not part of the Finnish exam in Finland, but it's part of the exam in Germany. In Germany, for the German language exam, there is this image explanation, I think, section that you speak about the image. In my app, you either speak or you write, but the idea is that you look at the image and then you try to build vocabulary. So you build your brain, you help your brain to recognize surroundings. So in the first blog post, I talk about how I use Nano Banana and Firebase AI and Flutter app to generate an image, and you provide the audio while you are speaking, and then Gemini model analyzes your audio, corrects your mistakes, and also gives you grading. I also provide the evaluation criteria, attach it to the prompt, and it's official evaluation criteria, and it's really surprisingly well. Gemini does it very well. So I think speech to text, text to speech was the way to do this previously, but with AI, speech analysis is very good. Mm-hmm. So this was the first. This was the idea of the first blog post. Should I continue with the second one, or
I have
the first one?
Yeah, a couple of questions and comments. It's interesting. I have a handful of things I'm curious about there. So you mentioned kind of evolving from speech to text to modern generative AI powered, again, basically speech to text. Mm-hmm. So the old world was just a finely tuned model that was trained to only do that and wasn't generative. Obviously you need generative AI to analyze the words and correct grammar and all of that kind of stuff, but is the raw sounds to text functionality of a model like Gemini also better and more accurate? Does it transcribe the words more accurately than an old world speech to text model? I've never tested that or heard of anybody else measuring that.
Yeah. Do you want to test now? We can give a try now. Shall we do it?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay, awesome. So you're sharing my app screen right now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So let's continue then. Let's see. Okay. So this is look and tell part. I'm gonna choose a topic. Let's start something specific to Finland. Have you been to Lapland? I know you were in Norway when we were doing Flutter and Vikings, so Flutter Vikings. You went to Norway, sadly, but did you go to Lapland?
I did not, and sadly, I've also not been Anywhere in Finland, I would love to
Okay.
go.
Okay. Lapland is the north of Finland, and it's like very famous with Santa Claus. There is a house of Santa Claus for tourism.
Mm.
Yes, and yeah, it's
Well, it
very
looks
popular
lovely.
place. It's increasing. Yeah. Okay, so this is Lapland, not in winter, but in I think spring. So I don't speak Finnish actually. I'm building the Finnish learning app. I might Finnish bad, so I'm gonna cheat here. But I'm gonna speak for 90 seconds, but I'm gonna do it less. Okay. So now it's recording. Oops, I already started. Wait, I don't wanna. Okay, let's do this one more time. Kuvassa on kaunis syksinen metsä Pohjois-Suomessa. On ilta ja hamara, sillä valo on pehmeä ja rauhallista. Kuvassa on ihminen, joka on kyksä metsäpolun vieressä. Hänellä on päällään punainen takki ja jalassaan ulkoilukengät. Hän kerää maasta punaisia marjoja, ehkä puolukoita pienen koriin. Sammalan seassa kasvaa myös keltaisia sieniä ja maassa näkyy kuivia oksia sekä askelten jälkiä. Taustalla on mäntyjä ja koivuja, joissa on keltaisia lehtiä. Tunnelma on hyvin hiljainen ja levollinen. Luulen, että marjastaminen on mukava ja rentouttava tapa viettää siltaa. Okay, now let's send this to AI. So when I first showed this to, like, I was in another stream talking about my app. I showed this and they thought it was lorem ipsum. So because Finnish is really difficult. Like there is a reason why we couldn't learn easily.
So you were reading that big section in the middle there. You said your Finnish isn't good, and then you started talking. And before I realized that you were reading, I was like, Finnish seems pretty good to me. So how much of what you even just read did you understand?
Very few. Like I picked the
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Okay. But because I was reading, now I received B1 in CEFR level. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's a European standard from A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So it's like the just above beginner. So let's say how AI evaluated my speaking. So highly accurate, covering almost all key elements visible in the image, such as person's clothing, mushrooms, basket, twilight atmosphere. Speaker maintains a very logical structure and communicates the mood effectively. To improve, speaker should work on natural flow and word endings, and hesitations and minor pronunciations and grammatical errors currently place the performance at B1 level. To reach the B2, speaker needs to reduce the frequency of search-related pauses and achieve a more even natural tempo. Additionally, greater grammatical precision is required, particularly with Finnish case endings and pronunciations. So focus on fluency, of course, word endings, and smooth transition between sentences. So
question here. It's funny that it's saying there's grammar inputs needed too. You were reading something. So did that contain grammatical errors?
Yeah, because I made some error. Because Finnish is like you add suffixes and it changes the meaning completely. Like two letters changes it. If you don't pronounce it well, it can have very different meanings. So accuracy and completeness is fine. Pronunciation and fluency is the problem, but there are noticeable hesitations.
Okay,
vocabulary
this was a test of an entirely Gemini powered flow. So it was both transcribing what you were saying and then obviously offering this analysis on what it transcribed as well. And this would be, we probably won't be able to test right now, but just kind of academically, I'm curious how similar would the experience have been if it was an old world text to speech model and then you just fed the transcription to Gemini and said, like, you know, analyze this. I guess it wouldn't have been able to talk about the pauses. It wouldn't have been able to talk about how smoothly you were talking. So that would certainly be an area where it couldn't compete. So that's interesting. But also as cool as this feature is, and it is very cool, this is just kind of other ways that your Finnish app uses GenUI, or sorry, Gen AI.
Gen
It
AI.
isn't Gen UI yet.
Yes.
So yeah,
So
so
now
keep going
yeah.
through the app. Yeah,
Mhm.
let's see some Gen
Yeah,
UI.
we can do the Gen UI version. We did Gen AI. Now let's do the same thing with Gen UI. Okay. Now let's do this. The same flow. Okay.
It's another
Okay.
area where you change
Now,
one letter and you get a totally different meaning.
yeah, exactly. So now with Gen UI and Gen AI. So Gen AI, how this flow works, the pipeline. I give a prompt saying that, hey, like create me an image about Lapland, be random. And it's very stupid to say to LLM, they be random. It's like, don't make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
So be random, like based on what? Because it's stateless,
Yep.
And like be random, but still there is this high probability, some peaks on some scenes. In Lapland, it's usually snow. And like if you tell it to be random, it will still gonna be similar scenes, even if you provide high temperature, high randomness, because there are some peaks that it will go around. But what we are doing with GenUI is that we are introducing the entropy with user selection. So it's kind of a refinement. So now we are talking about Lapland, but now we are going to choose the first, the world setup. It's in winter and it is nighttime. Let's see.
So wait, what you're telling me is Gemini itself centers around snow. And so when you were given the opportunity to refine it yourself, you chose winter.
Okay. Because I want to see Aurora.
It's fine,
Aurora is really
I'm
cool.
being silly.
Okay, but we can still create variations in winter. Okay. So now let's see. Okay, you choose. You tell me.
Okay, well, let's see. These are let's do the remote cabin porch. I think I like the idea of going for the Northern Lights, and that maybe is going to be
next.
Lend itself to some Northern Lights viewed from this porch. I suppose then.
So what is happening at the cabin porch then, Craig?
Okay, person stacking firewood, reindeer. Oh, reindeer. That seems interesting. Warm tea, snow. No, reindeer. We got. Oh wait, no. The last one says Northern Lights. We got to do that.
Okay, we can do this. But we can also show different options if you don't like those. So you always have this if you don't like it. Now
yeah, I like that
camera.
part. I like that part of your article of talking about like resetting the.
Yeah.
Also, folks, the links are very long and link sharing isn't very good on YouTube and whatnot. So I'm going to put the links to Çağatay's articles in the video description. They're not there now, but they'll be there after we're done streaming.
So it is white clothes. I think if you are looking for Aurora and Northern Lights, I think white shop is better. Let's do that.
For sure.
And the mood of the scene is magical and mysterious. I picked it for you.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
And the last part, you tell me what you want to see in the picture. So this is the best part because you can choose what vocabulary you want to train while describing. So let's see. Oh, there's dog.
Oh yeah, dogs. Definitely dogs. Always dogs.
Let's have the dog. What else?
Oh, more things. A frosty window pane. No, that's going to be in the way of the Northern Lights. We don't want that.
Yeah.
A hanging porch lamp. No, we don't want other light sources to compete with the Northern Lights.
Okay.
Let's do the stacked firewood.
Okay.
And a wooden sledge.
Okay.
I'm realizing I've only ever encountered the word sledge if it's immediately followed by hammer. I don't know what a sledge is if it's not a hammer.
You see the emoji next to it, right? It is like the you sit on it and then you sleep. Yeah, well, you sit on it and then you. It's like a sports in Finland, with kids.
Oh, so we tend it in the States. We only call that a sled, ending on the letter D. Interesting. Okay, this is perfect. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Well, this is gonna take a while because the previous one. Okay, I'm gonna give you another hint because this is gonna take a while. It's a pro model, and you can ask me why you are using an expensive model. I can explain why. Because
why are you using an expensive model?
Exactly. So I will show you other examples as well. So in the first one, you said I pressed the skip button, right? It was immediate because when I generate an image, I immediately put it to Firebase storage. So if people just don't want to be bothered about this refinement process, they can use the images that were shown or created by other people. And not only that, so now this image is generated, it will be put to Firebase Firebase storage. And then another thing is that it's not the only practice that I'm doing with image in this app. This is not the only one. So when I generate an image, I use it. You saw the sample, right, that I was reading, okay? And in that sample text, I use close, this you fill in. So I show the photo, I show the paragraph to the user, and there is this fill in the blanks. The fill in the blank is another app, another user. And then the last one is that verbs. So you look at the image and you try to type the words you see. So let's see, this is another cool thing now coming. So now it's gonna annotate. Annotating like with Firebase 3. I think this is not the Pro model that is annotating now. So what I'm doing as a next step is that I give the image to Firebase AI, and then I say that, hey, please annotate this so that when I am studying, I can use these verbs. So koira means dog, lumi means slow, pukka is sledge, mökki is cottage. I know these words. Yeah. Okay, this is a wide one. Anyway, so now when you are practicing, you can either write or speak, and you can wait. Okay, I can also hide this, but I think there is a bug. Anyway, there is also this vocabulary. So you can already practice. You can already use these words, like for example, mökki. So mökki means cottage. And then when I'm giving the vocabulary, I'm also like giving examples in different levels. So yeah, this is the idea.
That's very cool. I'm just typing in this very video's chat that I want to cuddle with that husky, which I do. Okay, so let's break down what we just saw that's GenUI and what isn't, because I imagine the refinement questions were all GenUI. Is that right?
Yes.
So when it was something like, the 4 seasons of this, or like what season do you want the scene to be in? That's a question that could theoretically apply to almost every scene someone would want, less relevant for an indoor scene. But I'm guessing that was by the way, the folks in the chat are ready for your app in other languages. So look out, Duolingo. So that question could have been kind of off the shelf, but I'm guessing it was a GenUI because it wouldn't really make sense for indoor scenes. So, and then presumably the questions to follow it were all GenUI. So kind of walk us through that. And yeah, I'd love to see kind of how you're stitching that together.
Yes, but I want to do also debugging on screen to show step by step, but it doesn't find the device. Sorry.
Well, of course, because we're live streaming, so nothing works.
Okay.
This is
well. Let me show the now. Okay. So, are you seeing the article now?
Sure am.
Okay, you are seeing the article now. Okay. So let's go to article because here the entire flow is shown. Okay. So this is the GenUI surface. And everything around it is like a controls, navigation, and some summary. So this is my Flutter screen, and this is the surface widget from the SDK. And LLM gives me the blueprint of this, how this should look like. And then it uses the catalog widgets to display in this area. And when I press a button, this part is the summary is updated, and it is not GenUI part because this widget is subscribed to the interactions in this GenUI area. Yes.
And is that subscription part of the? I believe the answer is yes here. That subscription is facilitated by the GenUI SDK.
Exactly, but
Okay.
it doesn't have to be GenUI also. Let's see, here is better. So this is the GenUI response. And this is my GenUI area. And my catalog widget is wrapped with bound string. Bound string makes this widget subscribe to the selection. And when you select something, it rebuilds. So let's see what the ATUI returns. So this is the version of ATUI because ATUI is a protocol, and I think recently it was bumped to 0.9. In fact, this feature was built when the protocol was 0.8, and I had to do some migration. Yeah. So let's see the response. So I have the version, and then the message is update component. So the first message is here. The first message from, because it's a stream of messages from LLM. The first message is create the surface. And this is the surface ID, and this is my catalog ID. Send data model through, yes. And then this is the first message, and now it's the second message is, okay, I created the surface. Now let's update the components. And LLM just returns this one. So people are asking, is GenUI expensive to use? Like, is it consuming a lot of tokens? No, it is not, because in the end, it is just returning you JSON. It's not returning you the entire widget. So like, this is the message. The first one is the root, and the root is column here. And then below that, we have the children. And these are the IDs of the catalogs items. And this is the first catalog. It's like the column, and this is declarative. ATUI is a declarative protocol.
Yeah, you told it that all of these different components exist and are on the menu from which it can choose. Yeah,
exactly. And now, like here, these are the IDs, and label and sub-label here is optional. And then whatever
you told it that a an image option tiles component needs those three values. Is that correct?
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, okay. And the second one is time selector. It doesn't have sub-label. It's only ID and label. But important part here is this selected option. And it's like a path. It's a local storage in this SDK. When you make a selection, you save the selection in this path, scene and season. It's like JSON pointer. And then your entire app can subscribe to these changes. So it's like an observable data binding. It's a data binding. So your code can subscribe to that. That's why when you select something, this summary is updated because it is subscribed to this observable. It's like this data model.
I see. So there's something super interesting here that I want to, or at least super interesting to me. Well, everyone can judge for themselves whether they think it's super interesting. But the application state here. So for folks who have not read this post here, again, it's going to be in the video description. You could also just Google the title of this. And of course, you'll find it on Medium right away. But it's very good read and excellently written, very clear, all these whatever other praise I could bestow upon you.
Just want to say, Craig, I spent 2 weeks to write this one.
Well, it shows because it's
my paternity leave. I wouldn't do it. It's my paternity leave, and I want to invest a lot on that. And there is a huge difference before I started writing this article and before and after. Now, after writing this, I understand the entire flow. Now I can build the most interesting parts. Like I will come to other part. Like this was the beginning for me. After this, I will show you another cool feature that I built. But if I hadn't written this article, I wouldn't have been able to build this cooler feature.
Yeah. I mean, the best way to learn is to teach. That's why I got into developer relations. I figured that'd be the only way I'd ever learn Flutter. Okay, so there's application state here that it's very clear. We've kind of got the shadow of it visible by the fact that there's this data path that other parts of the application can subscribe to. So that makes it very clear that there's some application state, but like hidden in the managed by and hidden into the in the SDK.
Yes.
But if I understood your article correctly, you have successfully prevented it from automatically writing back to the server. Like it's kind of managing some local state, but that is not the actual kind of source of truth in terms of the database and whatnot. If you actually are ready to persist data, you handle that yourself in these other widgets, right?
Yes. I want to go one step back, if it is okay. I don't know. Do we have time?
We got
timing?
We got
Okay, so this is my third article, but before that, there is the second article. Actually, it's the quite interesting one because I achieve exact same without GenUI SDK, because it's not about the protocol. Protocol just makes it that everyone builds in the same way. It's a standard. But the idea is you can build with yourself alone with using structured output. So let's go through that step by step. So what problem we are solving with GenUI? I think it's the most important thing here. Because when I started in the first article, this was my prompt. It's a long prompt. It's a Finnish wildlife. I just provide this long prompt, hoping that every time I run this, there will be a different scene. And it didn't work because you can't just tell AI be random, like not make mistakes.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is the result when I just provide one prompt that, hey, be random in these 5 lines. And then these are the things, like the same scenes, the output were quite similar, the same animal. This is a very like a Finnish species anyway. And then like same animal, same scene. Okay. So it requires more entropy. It requires more like interaction with the user. Tell me exactly what you want. And so I was telling that, okay, I can solve this problem with GenUI. And when I was trying to solve this problem, I didn't know I was using GenUI. In fact, this feature was out before the GenUI was a thing. So what I did before knowing about GenUI, I had Finnish statemation. So I'm going to ask questions, 5 questions to user, okay? And then based on this, I'm going to create an image. So like these are the answers from the user. And then I'm telling, first I'm telling Gemini, hey, these are the inputs and give me a prompt that is suitable for this image generation. I just provide this map, and then this is the output of Gemini. First, it gives me a good image prompt. Now, because I said winter, dusk, icy lake surface, the seal, it's a medium shot, it's mysterious and cold, and there is air hole, there's cracking ice. These are the environmentals. And then definitely now I create a different seal here.
That's different, all right.
Exactly. Now, yep, these are my prompts, blah, blah, blah. But I want to go through the Finnish statemation part. Let's see. Okay. So this schema thing is not specific to GenUI. If you're building a product with Firebase AI, you are probably familiar with structured outputs. Structured outputs make sure that your output is an object that you can serialize or deserialize from JSON to JSON, from JSON to JSON. So when I create the model, I say that, hey, this is my output. Okay, let's see how I create the model. Actually, I can see how I create the model somewhere here, probably. Let's see. Okay, so when I create it's not here. Okay, somewhere here. Anyway, when I create the model, generative model, I say that the output should have this schema, and it gives me this JSON file. So the output becomes a JSON file. And this is how I define that my output should look like. So when I give you this input, like where should the scene okay, when I give you this input that I'm going to ask you a question, and your response your output should be a JSON. So based on that, I receive output, and these outputs is something like setting, question, options. And the other is subtype, question, and options. And then, because generative model gives me the output in JSON, I can map the values to my own widgets in Flutter. So for example, you see the label field, sub-label field, and options here. So I parse the response if it is state 1, and then this is the structured output.
Yep.
And based on that, I map it to widgets, and I build it for the state.
Yep.
So the first state is this. Okay, it's when I explain, it's quite difficult to follow.
So I think it's possible here that folks who haven't done much GenUI are could be getting lost. I don't know. I have done just enough to be following the plot here because we had the Flutter team made a big coffee app demo this spring, and it did all of these same patterns. So what kind of essentially what's happening here, right? Gemini is responding with an instance of this schema that you've generated, and you know the full set of possible states that the response object can be in, and then are just using old-fashioned Dart switch statements to map them to specific widgets, and then you're going to return that widget in a build method, and it shows on the screen.
Yeah, that's why it's called finite state mation. So you know the states, finite state mation.
So you have, I'm not sure what direction if I was not talking right now, I'm not sure what you'd be saying, but an area that is interesting to me is that like we're going back in time in your development process here, right? Originally we were looking at the third blog post, and now we're looking at the second. So the code that you've just shown and what we're just talking about is an earlier version of the Finnish app that has been replaced with an implementation that leans more heavily into the GenUI SDK. And one of the things in your third article that you talk about is how you've got that table that kind of helpfully breaks down changes between part 2 and part 3 and what changed. And one of them is that you don't have these Dart switch statements anymore. You instead allow the GenUI SDK to essentially do the same thing. And so I'm curious, kind of what did that unlock for you? What was the extra flexibility that became available to you once you graduated from a dedicated chunk of Dart code that you were maintaining that had a switch statement to allowing the GenUI SDK to do the same thing?
Okay. That's really great direction that we are going in this conversation. But I was checking the chat. There was a question like, what are the use cases of GenUI? Okay. This is a really, really important question, because when you were first talking about GenUI in a AMA or some event, I was asking like, is there any use case of GenUI outside of chat with the agents? So because like all the examples about GenUI was about the LLM returns a text, instead of showing a text, show a widget from the catalog and still talk with the agent. And I wanted to break that. And this is a good use case. This is still kind of a chat, but it's like a different kind of representation of chat. But after we finish this talking about this image use case, I'm going to show another use case that is a very valid use case of GenUI outside of chat. Okay.
Interesting.
Do you want to see it now or later?
Well, let's wrap up this thread first.
Okay,
and
let's
then,
wrap up this
and then
one.
we can
Okay,
switch over to
perfect.
it.
Okay, but let's go to this after that. You will understand again, like the audience will understand what I mean. So what changed when I switched to GenUI SDK? First of all, like we all speak the same language. So when I say A2I, when I say data model, when I say catalog, we speak the same language. And this setup, the finite state mation that I built myself, was catching the previous selections in my like domain layer. And I was doing things manually, and adding one more step was visiting all this flow one more time. Also, this was a very specific solution for one feature. But in my app, this is not the only GenUI application that I have. I have 3 more use cases with GenUI. And I needed to repeat the same solution, the same entire infrastructure built myself.
Yeah. Okay.
But of course, I can reuse some part of it. But still, and also this is like battle-tested protocol. I can come up with my own solution. But you people behind this protocol, ATUI protocol, knows what they are doing, much more than experienced than I am. And in fact, it introduced me new cases. For example, you can talk back to GenUI, like a GenUI model. For example, it shows you some output, and then you press a button, hey, show me it again. I didn't like this. So in my case, it would be like writing a lot of extra maybe code to, hey, just I don't like it, do it again, maybe more thing. But there is a standard way of doing that. Mm-hmm. Another thing is that in my case, the responses are one JSON output. It's like one result, one text. But with this GenUI, it's a stream of chunks. So you get the results on the way. It immediately gives you the first update component message. And then the second update component gives you the other one, the last one, until you see the finish. And also, like, it's a buffering the chunks. It's like a stream. Mm-hmm. I can also build myself too. Yeah.
Are you able to do anything useful before you get the full page? Like when you get that first message before, a little earlier than you would have otherwise gotten the complete message, can you do anything interesting with just that first message? It says like root, like what does the app do? Does the user get something interesting to look at more quickly?
Yeah. Actually, in the next use case, it does that. So I'm not waiting the messages from, because it already, so in the next use case I'm going to show, it's going to show me the pages, the first page, the second page, the third page. So while the LLM is giving me the result, the first page is already visible. And then while user is reading the first page, the second page is coming with streams,
Okay.
So it's like kind of a stream. So latency is decreasing.
I see. Okay.
So you see it already while things are being done in the background.
So overall, is it fair to say that switching to the GenUI SDK basically made your code more dry, made it easier to maintain, and overall improved your developer experience? Is that what I'm hearing?
It is also standardized. We are talking about the same thing when I'm talking GenUI. Yeah. So let's see. I want to give big kudos to Flutter team, by the way, because Flutter has been one of the early adopters of GenUI, implementing this ATUI protocol. So if you see the list of renderers here, you said Flutter GenUI is stable, woo, and Jetpack Compose planned, Swift UI planned. So you don't have this solution if you are a native developer. Yay! So thank you. Yeah. because you chose to be an early adopter, I'm already in production, and my users love me because of this.
A lot of people on the Flutter team jumped on that very early and have been working very hard for a very long time already. That is true.
But can I briefly talk about GenUI in general? So the thing is that what you are suggesting with this Flutter GenUI SDK, it is not something that Flutter team came up as a solution. Flutter team is just the implementer for this renderer. The idea is like from a broader team that is like client agnostic, backend agnostic solution. So what is ATUI? ATUI is a protocol. It's like declarative UI. It gives you how your screen looks like. It's a screen recipe. Can you show this comment? What is the cost of GenUI? Can you share this comment? Yes, this is a very good question I mentioned earlier. So it's not that expensive, because in the end, what you receive is the JSON data. It's just text output. It's not like anything image, nothing audio, and text is cheap. So the GenUI doesn't increase your cost dramatically. And in fact, it can be even more optimized. If you write it yourself, you maybe, in your prompt, maybe you write much more system prompt to explain how this finite state machine works. But with generative UI, the prompts already include the protocol defined in the SDK. But let me talk about what ATUI is. So ATUI is a protocol that has the 4 ideas. The first idea is the surface. As mentioned, surface is a Flutter widget, and it tells GenUI that, hey, your results, I'm going to render everything here. And the second is catalog. Catalog is your design system widgets and subset of design system components that you tell LLM, please, your response should only use this set of widgets. And this is not a limitation. It's super important. This is a safety because LLM can go crazy. And you can just write here stuff, column, list, something else, and you can see unexpected results. And especially in large companies, okay, I'm a small indie developer. I'm still flexible. But in corporates, you have very serious users and you still need to look professional. So you can't take your risk that LLM comes with something crazy to render. So you already have your components. You tell which component for which use case LLM should choose, and then they render it. GenUI renders it. Yep. Okay, I think important thing here is that in my manual solution, I was asking Gemini to give me the JSON, and I was using switch. I interpret it, but in ATUI, SDK interprets the output and then picks the solutions. Okay, so
do you want to talk about the other components of the GenUI
exactly,
protocol?
But exactly, just a second, but I just want to say something really important. Okay, maybe coming later. Okay, data model. So we talked about surface, we talked about catalog, and now the important part is the state management, or whatever you say, like storage. How do you store your selection? It's the data model. So it's kind of a place where you want your selections, your interactions, or like based on actions, what needs to be stored. For example, when you press something, the selected label or string should be saved in this place, like path. It's the path of your selections. Let's see how we... is it in here? It has been a long time that I didn't check this article, but I will come down, I think, somewhere. Anyway, okay, it was the selection place. And then in this set path, the other parts of your code can subscribe to the changes there. And the final part is the transport. I think this is what makes a huge difference, because transport is what makes this GenUI SDK usable for different providers. So it doesn't have to be Firebase AI. It doesn't have to be Gemini. It can be like OpenAI solutions or other providers, LLM providers. And it can be different protocol, like WebSockets, like this A2A. There are other protocols. But ATUI transport allows you to connect your model output to your surface. And there, in my own implementation, because I'm using Firebase AI, in the transport layer, I connect the Firebase AI with the GenUI. This is what is different between 0.8 and 0.9 as well. Okay, let's go. Okay, now let's figure this.
I do have one. I have one question about the data model. We're talking about these paths and JSON and whatnot. Is it possible to have type safety on the schema that is stored in there? I think most Dart developers are accustomed to having type safety everywhere. So I'm wondering how those paths shake out in practice.
Yes. Well, I've been using this bound string. So here you see bound string. You tell that your selection will be a string. But I know that there is bound list. But let's check the SDK quickly. API reference. And here GenUI, and there should be bound. Okay, there is bound bool, bound functions, bound object. I think this could be something that it can be. I'm not sure. I think this bound object could do some stuff, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I've been working only with the strings.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, but let's see the catalog item, okay? So what is this catalog item? So catalog item, in the previous part, when I was building my own GenUI solution, I had only this tile selector widget. And to integrate it to GenUI SDK, I need to wrap it with bound string. And bound string enables that, like your selection, when your selection changes, your data path, when the value in the data path changes, this widget will be rebuilt. And in fact, there is a builder pattern here. So based on, it's like value listenable builder, actually. This bound string is kind of a value listenable builder, and it has a selected value based on that you, okay. So when you select a tile, what happens on selected? But before that,
well, there's one line here that I'm not quite understanding. In the bound string, its first parameter, data context, you're passing it context.data context. What is that? Because that feels like it's very critical. But I don't know what it is.
Yes. Let me also remember that.
Yeah, as we look at this on Medium, where there's no IDE affordances.
I think this context is not the build context. It's not the element from the elementary.
Right.
So this is why I don't like the SDK, like, because there are different contexts around. I really don't like. I don't know, like, is it really element context or the GenUI context?
Right. I assumed it was the GenUI context.
Yes, it's a GenUI context, and then the response, GenUI response, is reached from context.data. So you receive the response from GenUI, and then this is extension type. This is the data. And then the extension type, let's revisit this extension type. So you receive the output, JSON, and then it's like a question field, options field, and selected option field. It's just a like easy access.
So you wrote this code. You wrote this code.
Cloud writes it, or Codex writes it in the end, or whatever.
But it's in your.
I interpret my idea.
Yeah, it's in your app. Well, it's not in the
my app.
SDK.
Yeah. Or from the documentation, there are a lot of inspirations as well. Okay, let's see. So this is the data that is JSON, and then I have the selected option here. So when this rebuilds, the selected option is already updated. And this is the value now. This is the latest selection of selected option. And then I use this value, wait. This is a selected option. Okay, let's see. The value is in here. And now there is another context. Here in the builder, wait a second. It gives me the...
Yeah, I think that context is the element, right? That's my guess, is the builder context is a Flutter thing.
Yes. But important thing here, the value here, what was the value? Value was the selected option, okay? The selected option was, it's this one, okay? This is the JSON output. I'm reading the selected option here, like value, selected option, and then the path value is the scene season.
Okay.
So value is the selected option, okay, the path value is that. And what I'm doing here, this context is GenUI context, and I'm touching data context and updating. So I am updating the selected value by providing, hey, this is the path. In this path, the selected value changed. Tell everyone who is subscribed to this data path model, just do whatever they do with this change. On selected, I first find the path, and I update the value in the path when the on selected is pressed.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
And when it rebuilds, okay, important thing is selected option. When it rebuilds, I read the current value and I build my catalog widget with this current value. And when something is selected, I update the data model. And when I update the data model, it rebuilds.
Yeah. Yep. So the subscription is the thing that I was wondering about. We've got data context there. The first parameter to the I forget the name of the widget now, but there anyway. So one of those parameters was setting the subscription. Yeah.
Yes, but let's see. I know where it is used. This subscription. Let's see. I have the code where it is used. When I'm talking about data model. Just a second. This is a long article. It's like 25 minutes read. So when you make a selection, so this part is subscribed to these selections, and then I update it here. And the code that does it should be somewhere here. Wait, somewhere here. Okay. So
Can you
attach
make
to
this
the-
text a little bigger, by the way? Yeah.
How about now? Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
So now here in my domain layer, I'm attaching to the selections. First, I get the, okay, this is outside of my widget area. Now we are in the domain layer. In domain layer, I have the surface controller. This is my controller. I am getting the context for this controller. It's not build context. If possible, please change the name. SDK, I don't know. Yeah. And I'm providing the surface ID to the surface controller. I'm receiving the instance data model. And then I'm subscribing here. Data model subscribe to this path. And then
Okay.
I'm notifier, add listener, update the selection. This is the logic. It's data binding, two-way. So in the widget layer, you write. And in the domain layer, you listen.
Yeah. Which makes sense. That's well, I guess that's actually a little different than typical Flutter apps. But okay, yeah. So in the widget layer, you write. That part definitely makes sense. And then in the I guess
domain
it's
layer,
pretty much always in the domain layer you listen.
Or
Yeah,
model,
yeah.
whatever.
That makes sense.
Outside of UI layer. But the thing is that it's very, like, it's a data binding context. If you're an Android developer, there was this XML and code connection between data binding, two-way binding, read and write. So data binding is a very common model pattern. Anyway, so this is it in the end. But I want to give one more thing before telling more. I know it has been quite a long time in this stream, but I want to tell one important thing. Actually, this is it. Your catalog is approved your design, like your catalog is your approved design system, and you give your catalog to the model, and it's the entire vocabulary that your model can give you a receipt of your screen. But I think this is the striking line, I think. The quality of GenUI is all about the quality of components you provide. Because in the next use case, which we will come after this one, I spent 2 days to build my catalog, and the results are completely different. Like, it's like mind-blowing. When I spent much more time on design system, because what you need to do is that with design system, you need to have catalog items, each have specific roles and responsibilities. So if you have 2 catalog items competing for each other, it's random. You need to make it more deterministic, that each catalog item has specific role.
Yeah, I think we might be ready to see that other example. I'm really curious as to what it is.
Okay, perfect. But I want to tell before that, it's going to be a very short thing, because every image generation flow is one session, and when I start the process, I set up first, because this is a Potato code. I just want to tell you Potato code, what is happening here. So first, I assign a surface controller. It's one of the 4 pillars of ATUI. I first create a surface controller, which I provide my catalog. And when I create this session, I provide my catalog, I provide my system instruction and the model I want to use. I created the surface control. And then I create my system prompt. This system prompt is critical, because each use case has different system prompt. Like my image generation has one long system prompt, but this prompt builder does much more than your original system prompt, because it tells the ATUI protocol to model. Because GenUI is agnostic which LLM provider is used. Gemini has no idea about what GenUI is, doesn't know how the protocol works. So this prompt builder actually includes the parts about how the model should give the answer, what it is about. So you provide your system prompt, system instruction here, and then this catalog. Let's see this catalog here. Okay, if I go up in the catalog item, okay, first, this is my catalog. When I have this catalog list, okay, catalog, I have this line, system prompt fragments. So not only my system instruction, but even my catalog has some rules. So when I create this GenUI session, there are multiple prompt fragments. One is coming from my catalog rules, one is my feature-specific use case, and the SDK injects A2I rules to the prompt. So that's why this prompt builder is important, yes. The second is the model. Model gives you the like safety settings and the system prompt. The transport layer is the agnostic, as we mentioned that this LLM provider is agnostic. And then this is where this is the callback. When onSend method is called, I implement my Firebase specific method in here. That's how, when I create the transport, I inject the Firebase specific details there. And the conversation is the glue between your surface and the transport, because all the communication goes through LLM and the surface. So transport is Firebase integration and surface is Flutter widget integration, and conversation handles it. And very easy, when you send a text, you tell that, hey, this is my system interaction, but in this step, you need to do this, and you send a message to LLM here. And this is the only part that you need to do if you use Firebase AI, because when I send a message, when LLM sends a message, or I'm not sure which one now, but anyway, but I need to convert the message I need to convert the message in a way that Firebase specific, because I'm using Firebase AI and Gemini, so Firebase SDK. So this is a conversion between your LLM and then Firebase stuff. See here, model is Firebase AI, okay? So you provide this callback method to transport to SDK. GenUI SDK has this transport, and you provide the Firebase integration there. And then, like here, we have the stream of chunks. Yes, this model is Firebase AI. And then you send the transport layer to GenUI, the text. And it's like with communication between two. But if readers if you read this article, you will understand much better than I'm explaining now. This was it. Okay, let's switch to other, because too much information. Should we go to the other one?
Let's do it.
Or do you have any question? Okay.
Randall says he's been reading his XKCDs recently, and we've got too many standards. We need a new standard to rule them all. And in the darkness, bind.
I'm going to tell you one thing. You provide this article to your agent, and then if there's a skill available somewhere in the internet, you don't need to understand what this is doing. If you really like, you can build features without understanding
how they work.
But this is just the protocol, how the protocol works. But you need to feed your agent about how the protocol works, and also you need to have a good architecture, like data layer, domain layer, and UI. You need to have separation of concerns. This is like more architectural decisions. Anyway, let's continue. I'm sharing now my app, and this is the final part. I'm not gonna take lots of your time. So, okay, this is the part that I specifically created for this session. This has been in my mind for a long time, but I said, hey, I am invited to this Flutter Observable, and I built this in 2 nights. So let's see. Now we are gonna build learning material. And this is the best part about GenUI, because GenUI has always been about chat, and instead of wall of text, you provide components. But this time, the use case is about, imagine that you're going to write a grammar book, Finnish grammar book, and then you don't know Finnish.
A minor problem.
Yes.
Minor problem.
You're asked to write a Finnish grammar book, you don't know Finnish. Okay, and you don't want to have a boring book that has paragraphs. What you need to do is, let's start one, let's say A1 level topic, and then let's say here we can choose a topic here, like there are so many Finnish things, but I'm just gonna go YOLO, like freestyle. Okay,
love it. Teach
me how kukka becomes kukam. So kukka is flower. When it takes a suffix, this an is like a genitive, it's like kukan. It drops 1K. This is a rule. You can't say kukkan, it should be kukan. Okay. And I want generative AI, generative UI, to teach me in an engaging way how this mechanism works.
I'm excited to learn. Then we can get started on
Let's see.
the grammar book.
Let's see. This is not the grammar book. This is like bit-sized grammar information.
Right, so but once we know this, then we can write the grammar book.
Yes. Okay, so now it's giving the first page. So this is the first chunk of the stream. Stream is going in behind.
Whoa,
so
why this matters for survival? These are high stakes.
So you will see another button when the second page is ready down here. Yeah, the second page is ready now. So LLM is still giving me. That will be the third page as well. So the second of the first page, okay? That might be the third page. I don't know.
So this is a callback to earlier when I was asking about the streaming nature of it and any like performance improvements there. It's like you got a whole thing that you could show, but then it's a wizard or, whatever. So the other thing is coming in afterwards. Okay, that's cool.
See, the third page arrived also. Now it's probably the third page, 3 pages. So like this is much better representation than a textbook. See, I have these components. So it tells you in the language that your device is. For example, my device is in English. But if my device was in Turkish, it would explain me comparing to the Turkish language, Turkish and Finnish. What I love about GenUI is that it doesn't give you the English book of Finnish. It gives you your language book, tells you like in your language, tells Finnish in your language.
Yeah.
And the best part is that when you are building app, you have compile time strings, right? Your like localizations. It's like 6 or 7 languages, 2 languages. But with
runtime localizations, tough. Yeah.
Yeah, with GenUI, you support all languages. That's the best part. Okay, so like this is giving me information. Look at the pattern, blah, blah. Now it is explaining. Okay, the first one was the concept, okay? In my system prompt, I'm just not telling, hey, tell me the Finnish grammar. Of course, like this looks easy, okay? But it is not. I'm not telling, hey, give me this, explain me this topic. I'm saying you're going to explain me the topic in a framework. Concept. The first page will be the concept. Explain me the concept. The second page will be the mechanism, like the suffix and everything. The last one will be the application. Let's see. This is the concept. It's explaining me the rule, first one. The second one is the mechanism. So this is generated by GenUI. Okay. It says kuka becomes kuka. And you cannot have a rule yourself. You write your code, okay? Hey, find this KK and then highlight it and then drop one and kukan, right? Like, because if there is another word like Helsinki becomes Helsingin and K becomes NG. Like, you cannot have this if-else logic.
Right.
That's why LLM explained it. Yeah. So this is much more visually engaging. It says, why does this happen? And then it gives me another examples. Now, the best part is the application part, the interaction. So it's not just a book. Okay, I'm not writing a grammar book. I'm writing an interaction. So how do you write jacket's pocket in Finnish? So jacket is takki. So if kukka becomes kukan, takki becomes takin tasku. Correct. So it's an interaction. This is also GenUI. So the best way to teach language is like I'm not a language PhD. I don't have PhD in language, but I'm learning something. I don't like reading book. I like to first visual engagement. The second should be like I interact with it so that I increase the engagement.
Yep.
Okay. And the last part, okay, this is the final part. Okay. Now you have an example, a small dialogue. Hey, blah, blah, this is how it is used. And then this is the entire summary, lesson summary. And then this is what you will learn next. You go here and it goes to another, for example, article if possible, or it tells you what you should learn more. And you press here, then you learn the next thing. Okay? That is cool. But now I'm going to show you one more thing, Craig. Okay, so you know something about widget preview that you proudly announced, right? Widget preview. Widget preview, I love it because the best use case of widget preview is that I am analyzing all these use cases. If it is explaining me this dropping, use this component. If it is table, give me the table. So now, while doing this Okay, it's going to take a while to start this preview, but I'm going to show you one more thing while doing that. This is going to be the last thing, I promise. I'm not going to take much of your time, but I'm so like hyped about this thing. I'm
Oh,
hyped.
I'm interested in how you're gonna connect Stitch to this. That'll be fun.
I don't have a PhD on language learning. I'm not a designer, but wow, AI stuff is cool. So I told you that I built this in 2 days. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. So this is how I built this. My entire Stitch is all about this generative. Okay, let's first this one. Let's see this one. So my widget preview. You will see my widget preview. I'm proud of. And as mentioned in the previous blog post, the quality of GenUI is capped with the quality of your components. So these are the components that I tell the catalog that, okay, if you are explaining in long, use this, and if you can show a table in this use, I'm telling in my system prompt, in this use case, use table. And I also see here like what happens in the long sentences. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah.
So for example, the interaction part. So like, let's see. These are all my components. This is a cart. You can use a cart in the... I tell LLM, you can choose a cart to provide this interaction, or you can explain how this conjugation works. These are the error cases. Just see, let me continue very quickly. So, okay, this is my component. And this is, that's how I explained this kukan thing. And this is my key long recap. This is my key takeaways. And here it is filled by the AI. Let's see. These are dropping the last blah blah explanations. Okay, this is the peony dialogue. Okay, this is another interaction.
This is a very extensive use case or usage of the new widget preview stuff. This is great.
Yeah, I think widget preview is just made for this GenUI because you have your catalog.
Right.
So
right.
Yes. Okay. Done. Then how I came up with this stuff. Okay. This is it. So I iterate a lot with Stitch. Okay. It's going to take a while.
I see that. You are a Stitch power user.
Okay.
These look good though. Yeah.
I'm not a designer. You know, what can I do? So there are many things that I iterate. Okay. For example, with this, I didn't like it and I went YOLO with this card. But okay, so let's see. Wait. Okay, I provide my screenshot here. It tells me alternatives, how it would look like. Another thing here. Let's see. Okay, this could be what is next. But I want to show. Okay, this is key takeaways. So what I'm writing here, a prompt. Okay, let's see. I have a very bad English prompt list here. Okay, let's see what was my this was my create a new component that shows the related articles. And then I say that first I feed Stitch what generative UI is. I'm telling it that, hey, I need to create components that I can reuse, and I need what is next stuff component. Just provide me the options, and I take the screenshot, or you can have Stitch MCP, and then anti-gravity or cloud or anything that writes your widgets. And I built this in 2 nights, and I didn't write the code. I just create this Stitch and told AI to write the widgets for me. That's it. That's all the idea.
It's pretty impressive. It is a cool feature, and I would love to learn Korean this way.
Perfect. You can build yourself. You have Observable Flutter. You can build. But okay, I want to tell you this, that with GenUI, the thing is that you're looking ways to explain an idea. Okay, you are tasked to explain a grammar topic, and you don't know, and it's one topic. And imagine you have a huge number of topics. You just don't care. You tell AI, hey, explain me this topic in the most engaging way, and then GenUI generates you the topic. So this is about if you have a lots of work to do, if you have one task that you don't repeat, that's very easy. You can give a lot of attention and time to think about how to structure this explanation, which component use. But if you give the list of components and if you try to cover all the use cases, think about how much comprehensive my catalog was. And it was orthogonal. My catalog was orthogonal, meaning that each catalog item had a specific role. So that and I try to think about, if I have a grammar book, how can I visualize it? And I try to cover all use cases. And for each use case, I have like, for not use case, but like this kind of a case, I have a corresponding component, and AI gives me the book.
It's pretty impressive. That's a pretty cool use case for a lot of different tools. You know, that's one of the biggest Stitch catalogs I've ever seen.
I'm a perfectionist, so I iterate a lot with Stitch.
Rody on the anti-gravity team also very big into Stitch. He would love to see the amount of screens you generated there. The MCP kind of ingestion pipeline of all of those visual artifacts straight into anti-gravity or Claude or whatever. Obviously then AI writing the individual widgets, AI then composing them on the fly. It's that's quite a pipeline there. Sam Susi says, is GenUI like Material UI? Well, Sam, I'm guessing that you've just popped into the stream, and if my guess is correct,
can I explain one more thing? Okay, please continue.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Sam, take that scrubber and move it all the way to the left.
But I can tell you that Material UI is how you fit your GenUI. So like you tell like, okay, it's not exactly the same. So you build your catalog using Material UI, and you tell GenUI, hey, use it and draw it. That's the relation.
Yeah. Material UI is a design system. GenUI is a way to have Gemini or something else assemble your widgets on the fly as needed for that given situation. Those widgets could be styled with Material. They could be Tailwind. They could be Cupertino. They could be your own custom brand. All right.
Design system engineers, not engineer, but like design system people. Okay, there are two types of designers in large companies. One is working on design systems, serving all the designers that use these components when you're designing a system. I think these people will be much, much more valuable in this age, in this era of this GenUI, because you need to think about the orthogonal components that with specific use cases, and then you feed it. Like, it's important. The last thing before closing, my wish, what I want to do next. Okay, so I hope a couple months after this, we have another stream or something. When I open my app, I want to have a home screen, and each home screen is different for each user, because I understand what my user needs, and I tell UI, hey, this is my user. Now they are B2 level. They need to increase vocabulary because in last week they studied listening. So compose your screen accordingly. So my entire app, my goal is that to make my entire app GenUI, it's gonna take a lot of time, not easy. Of course, navigations is not part of GenUI because it's like only the content. And like, if I can achieve hyper personalization with GenUI, then I will say that, okay, I can go to another language. Let's see.
Well, then we have to stop. We have to prevent you from reaching that specific milestone. Oh, no, I see what you mean. Another language, not leaving Dart, leaving.
Oh, like Korean or
I see. Yeah,
my next is Swedish. Yeah, on the pipeline. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then great. Well, then I do now again want you to reach that milestone. Okay. Well, Çağatay, thank you so much for coming on and walking folks through the beautifully written articles that you have. And, you know, we were jumping around in those articles. They're pretty long, they're sizable, but if you just kind of set aside some time and read them top to bottom, like, you're really going to pick up a lot of relevant info. If someone was going to read just one and they wanted to get the latest on GenUI, I would say part 3 is kind of it stands alone on its own as well. So there's that.
Yeah.
For
So
anyone
my
who-
articles always have a story. So I just don't write this rewritten of this documentation. I want to have a story. And I think this is a good story to learn how the GenUI works. But I see GenUI like a navigation. This huge debate that Flutter didn't really do well with navigation libraries or navigation stack. I'm a big fan of Navigator 2. Navigator 2, people hate it because it's too complex, because it has 4 different components like router delegate, router parser, and this kind of 4 different delegates that builds one thing in together. And it's exact same thing. This GenUI has 4 different components that gives you the full machine. And it's not like people are super hyped, excited about GenUI, but it is not easy to dive into GenUI. And if you just rely on your agent to write the feature for you, you will lose all the potentials that what you can do next with GenUI. So you need to understand how it works, so it gives you another ideas. So after writing this article, I was able to write this grammar use case in 2 nights.
Yeah, I don't think I would be able to do it in 2 nights, but you put in months of
I have a
learning
baby.
and
I'm in
hard
parental
work.
leave now. I'm a parental leave now, and I don't
Right.
sleep.
So the real trick for all of us is that we need to have a child,
And you need to
then
be
we
on
go on
parental
parental
leave.
leave.
Yeah. And you need to be in
then-
Europe because you have a salary paid when you are in parental leave of 3 months or 4 months. Full salary.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works in States though.
So move to Europe, have a kid, forego all sleep, but use the time not at your job to learn GenUI.
Yes.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
No, that but I mean obviously anything like that, requires time on task, really kind of marinating in it, to understand it and soak everything up. Well, Çağatay, thank you so much for coming on. This was really, really great. Folks, thanks for tuning in. Looking ahead, I think there's going to be a little bit of a stretch here where there isn't much observable Flutter, because next Thursday I'm going to be at Config in San Francisco giving a talk on GenUI of all things. And Çağatay has given me some new ideas to weave into that. And then the next week is an American holiday. And then I might be occupado the week after that as well. My kind of wild summer is wild. So I'm not actually in California very much this summer, but I will stream when I can. Will the talk be streamed or uploaded? That I sure hope it'll be at least a VOD. I'm not sure how Config does that, actually. I've just assumed that it will be a VOD afterwards, but your question is highlighting that that is an assumption on my part. No, there's other Config talks. They're VODs. I actually know this. Çağatay, any final closing thoughts on your end?
Yes. First of all, like you might say, I'm super hyped, super excited when I talk about GenUI, and my English is not my mother tongue, so I'm sorry if while I'm explaining, if I was too fast and too excited, if you're not able to follow. So good. And then follow the articles. And the last thing is that I think we are on this together, Craig. The reason why I spent 2 weeks on these articles is that I want GenUI to be successful. I want Flutter to be the pioneer and the early adopter of this. So Flutter needs success stories, and it's a collaborative work with community. So if you build something, share, let's learn from each other. I'm not worried that you steal my idea. Go implement it in Korean, go implement it in Japan. Don't wait for me to add a new language. Steal, because good coder steals.
Do you hear that, folks? Çağatay is not riding over the hills like a cavalry to save the day and teach us the other languages that we want to learn. We got to take matters into our own hands. No, but that's a great, I love the collaborative spirit. We were so happy to celebrate your work on the Finnish app at Google Cloud Next and at Google I/O, because you really are quite a pioneer on this front. And, you know, I mean, honestly, it's just very impressive. Tip of the spear, early adopter kind of stuff. So really, really well done.
Thank you very much. And this is my give back to you, because like if you told me that you would be featured in Google I/O or Cloud.net, oh, what the heck?
What the Flutter?
Yeah, what the Flutter, true. Yeah, anyway, thank you. This is my way of giving back. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate very much.
Yeah.
All right, folks. I don't know the date of the next stream, but I do know that it isn't next week. And I'm 95% sure it isn't the week after that either. But at some point, my whirlwind schedule will wind down and I will return to this chair and I will stream again. But until then, folks, thanks so much for tuning in and happy fluttering.